My name is Deborah Akintoye.
How old are you?
I'm 18 years old.
Are you going to vote in the upcoming EU referendum in 2 months?
Probably not.
Deborah is part of a growing number of young people in the UK who are becoming increasingly disinterested in political matters. More than 50% of 18 to 24-year-olds did not vote in the 2015 elections, and it's estimated that the same or an even higher percentage of young people will not be voting in the referendum in June. This is something the Prime Minister has tried to address.
This is a vote for your futures, because, as I say, you have the most to gain, the most to lose. That, I think, is the very strong case. I hope you'll vote for it on June the 23rd, but whatever you do, turn up and vote.
Headlines are bombarded with polls and surveys, and if you are young, black and female, you are least likely to vote in the EU referendum on the 23rd of June. And as a young lady of African descent myself, who did vote in the 2015 elections and is already registered to vote in the referendum, I wanted to find out why.
You just eat it. I'm currently studying my last year of A-levels. I like hanging out with my friends. I like playing the piano, singing in the choir, but mostly hanging out with my friends. Yeah. Exactly. We like to go to the shops, so in town. We also hang out at the library sometimes, but mostly for revision.
I decided to spend the day with Deborah and her sister Toby to try and figure out their attitudes towards the referendum and what it will take to get more young people voting.
Because we're all going to university soon, we usually talk about university, what we want to do, subjects, yeah.
And do you ever talk about politics?
No, not really. Because I think we don't really think it's relevant to us. It doesn't affect us, so it's not something that we're really interested in.
Green Party GLA candidate Rashid Nix says it's the government that has created a drop in the turnout of younger voters.
That's my opinion. The government doesn't want young people to vote, full stop. And whatever they can do to get less and less people off the voter list, they'll do it. They'll do it. So they're making voter registration more complicated and more difficult at a time when it should be getting easier.
Today, Deborah and her sister are meeting up with friends 18-year-old Alex and 18-year-old Tamara to what they refer to as town for some shopping. They are considered part of the group that will be most affected by the UK's decision to stay in or leave the EU. After a day shopping, we settle for a meal at the local McDonald's and I give them a set of questions to discuss.
Do you know what's happening on the 23rd of June? No. What's happening? Is it your birthday? My birthday's in October. Is it? Yeah. I knew that. No, I know. It's when you have to vote. Because when we went to Buzz to the Dinimajiki, they said that we would all be celebrating by voting the next day after the last exam.
Do you know what you're voting for?
To stay in? Stay in the EU, yeah.
Matt Lawrence from the Institute of Public Policy Research says young people of an ethnic minority group are least likely to get involved in politics.
You do tend to see turnout differentials between various sort of groups in the UK, so between older and younger, between richer and poorer, and you also tend to see differences between sort of white British and BAME British in terms of turnout rates. Not huge, but there is a gap, and part of that reason is there tends to be an argument that people who are sort of more marginalised in political communities, in societies, tend to vote less. And obviously in the UK we still have significant structural inequalities that BME people are more likely to be in the private rental sector, more likely to earn less than average white Britons, and that contributes to less likelihoods of participating in political activity. And so that's obviously something we'd want to sort of try and redress as a country over the next 5 to 10 years.
Do you know what effects the UK remaining in or leaving the EU will have on you?
No. No idea. Well, even leave, we can't go to like different countries and stuff.
You need to get visas.
Will the effects be like immediate? Or will it
I don't think
like,
it'll be immediate.
It doesn't have anything to do with education, so I don't think it really affects us. Apart from like if you want to study in a different country, but even so, you can still do that even if we're not part of the EU.
Why should I vote in the EU referendum? It's nothing to do with me anyway. Trust me, the EU is a market of nearly 400 million people, defined by the free movement of goods, services and people. Now if that young lady, 18 years of age, gets upset because a person from Poland or France or Spain or Portugal decides to come over to Britain and go for the job that she had her heart set on, and they get the job and she doesn't, then she begins to understand how the free movement of goods and services operates. When we need to go to the courts in this country, if the courts come up short, we can go to the European court, which supersedes the British courts. Yeah? So a lot of black people don't understand that. They just think, well, what's Europe got to do with me?
Why do you think a lot of young people who are black or of other ethnic minorities don't usually vote?
don't care. They're not interested in that sort of stuff yet, I guess. They are a minority in the country anyway, so
yeah,
even if
no
you vote,
point.
what's the point of voting when
If it's not gonna
happen my way?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Barack Obama, when he was here, talked about sort of how it's really important that all young people, regardless of background, really get involved in politics, as it's the most effective way to change the world. But I think one problem is that some young people look at the country and think, well, actually, my voice doesn't really matter, that I'm excluded, that there's systematic barriers to actually changing the country in the way that they'd like to see it change. So that's one issue, is about how can you make sure that politics can actually change things in a way that people are looking to do. You can then also take arguments around something like a compulsory first-time voting option, which is where in your first election you'd have to vote. And the argument there is because there's such big differences in turnout rate, so 65-year-old and plus vote twice as often as those 18 to 24, if you had compulsory first-time voting, you'd make sure that young people's voice is definitely heard at the election. And because voting is a bit like riding a bike, once you do it once, it's much easier to do it again. If you vote in your first election, you're much more likely to have political voice throughout your life at the ballot box.
What do you think young people can do to make their voices heard?
Yeah, I think social media, as you said, because social media is quite
it's just easy.
influential.
Lots of people see it.
Yeah, and use it, so it's a good way to get
People's attention about it.
To listen to.
I think by using like people like really influential people like YouTubers, who young people can also like relate to. I think that's really, because you get YouTubers that like promote like products and stuff. So why not get YouTubers that help young people know about politics and stuff?
The government is only interested in representing the people who go out and vote. So as long as affluent people vote, the government represents them. Poor old people vote, the government makes sure we look after their pensions because they're old and they'll vote us out of office. Young people don't vote, they'll give you tuition fees, they'll give you 75,000 student debt, you know, they'll make sure that there's no housing benefit for 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds. They'll make it hard for you. Why? Because you don't vote. So when young black people say, I'm not voting, I'm like, all right, you see what happens to you. You see what happens.
Would you like to remain in or leave the EU?
Stay in the EU. I think definitely stay as well.
And at the moment, we're predicting less than 50% of 18 to 24-year-olds will vote in the referendum. And what's interesting there, and difficult if you're pro-European, is that actually the group most likely to vote to stay in is the group least likely to actually turn out and vote. So the younger you are, the more pro-European you are, but also the least likely you are to vote. And I think in many ways that is how the referendum will play out. Will turnout of young people be enough to keep us in the EU?
Are you registered to vote in order to make that happen?
Yeah, I don't know.
I am. Seriously?
I don't even know how to register to vote. Well, will you register now?
I'm already registered.
I have to ask my mum first how do I do it.
Yeah.
And then
Just go to
Yeah.
gov.uk.
I
Register
don't know,
today.
probably. I'm saying yes now and you probably won't do it.
I don't have time.
Definitely, I mean, probably are.
The thing is, if everybody's saying that my vote doesn't matter, then that's a lot of people who
I get
say
what
my
you
vote
mean.
doesn't matter. So all those people not voting, there's,
Make another.
it can make a difference.
There are 1.7 million young people in London aged between 18 and 29. In the 2012 elections, 1 million people voted for Boris Johnson as the mayor. I said, you got 1.75 million young people, you could elect Stormzy as the mayor of London. You could have Skepta as the mayor of London. But because they're not educated as to how the process works, they don't realise that they have a numerical advantage. And if they use their social media and their Instagram and Snapchat and Facebook and whatever they're using to put the word out and say, listen, forget Labour, forget the Conservatives, forget Liberals, forget UKIP, dare I say, forget the Greens, yeah? Let's vote for our own young person's representative. You can make it happen.
At the end of the day, Deborah took me along on a visit to see another of her friends, 18-year-old Jonathan, who told me when I spoke to him that he in fact finds voting very important. Are you going to vote in the upcoming EU referendum?
Yes, I am.
Have you registered to vote?
Yes, I have. I just feel that as a UK citizen, I feel I have like a right to vote. So why not take the opportunity to get my opinions voiced? Yeah. This is our chance to actually have our say, to take part in the decision making in the economy. So in the long run, it affects not just us, but it would affect our future generations, so our children, our grandchildren. So our role in society today is to make sure that we get the best out of it, we get the optimum.